I guess there were many issues that were being brought up just now, and I think that you were talking about the kalima Allah and things like that, and as if that past was very consistent in saying that it is, it can be used by others. But if you were to look at the press, the ulama, they were like, first they say yes, then they say no, flip-flopping here and there. So like there was no consistency, right? And of course, when you talk about hudud, for example, you agreed that like in the Orange Book that was agreed upon by all the opposition parties, that particular thing was not there. And the opposition party, in order to, if they think that the main aim is to overthrow this current corrupt government, then the idea would be his idea as benevolent state, a state of care and opportunity, right? But unfortunately, we have never heard of the state of care and opportunity for quite some time, and we are reverting back to the old politics. Of course, we can come and discuss about it later on.
How do you relate that to be?
Yeah, but we can discuss about it.
All along we've been talking about benevolent state. But
yeah,
hudud, they say that hudud is Islamic state, they said. That is the accusation on us now.
So I guess it's okay. We will discuss about it. Prof has a few questions as well. And I think I'll invite upon Dr. Anas Atikiti to give his talk.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. My beloved Ustad Kifl, it's such a pleasure having you. And meeting you after all these years. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah. And the esteemed brothers and sisters and honorable guests, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My gratitude first of all goes to my dear brother Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa for inviting me, giving me the pleasure of being in this beloved country to me, and being amongst you also to discuss these ideas. And ultimately, without these kinds of discussions we cannot progress, either on an individual level, because I learn far more than I embark in terms of knowledge, and one of the greatest sources of knowledge is not knowledge itself, not information. It's how the word used by Ustad al-Kifl is contextualize it, meaning that the very same things that we're talking about here, I might say in Spain, or I may say in Australia, or I may say somewhere else, but it'll take a different guise simply because of the context. So I think that these kinds of discussions are extremely valuable, and for that I'm grateful to my hosts for arranging this program. Just a couple of things that I want to touch on. The first is, I agree entirely with the Ustad al-Kifl that I think it's become a non-issue now to talk about the compatibility between Islam and democracy. In fact, I actually tweeted immediately after the coup in Egypt in July last year, saying that the question about the compatibility between Islam and democracy must never be asked again. It's whether democratic countries are compatible with Islam coming through democratic processes that should be asked. So whether actual liberal democracy is compatible with democracy, I think that should be a question, because my reading and my take, and I might be a little bit harsh here, and I confess to that, but my take as an insider within Europe and within so-called Western structures is that whilst they remain amongst the best models that we have, they remain far short of the ideal of democracy. So democracy remains an ideal that people are striving towards, and one of the things that I advocate within British society, the non-Muslim sector even, is the fact that we need to reclaim democracy. We need to a grand project of reformation, simply because the levels of corruption, they may take a different guise than they take in the developing or underdeveloped world, but there's still ample levels of corruption. I think we discussed some of those in yesterday's session. Also, as I started yesterday, as someone who comes from a linguistic academic background, I'm quite picky and pedantic when it comes to terms. And as I maybe alluded to yesterday, I'm quite confused about the term political Islam or Islamist, I'm often described as, always, I'm described as an Islamist, a prominent Islamist, a leading Islamist sometimes. And when people ask me, I say, really, I don't know, simply because I haven't taken part in defining the term. It's been defined on my behalf. The meaning of Islamist. I mean, only today, as I was getting ready to come today, I was watching the BBC World Service, and the story about the Boko Haram was that they are an Islamist group. So basically, I'm saying that I'm in the same group as them. Is that real? Is that something that I am willing to accept? Of course not. So the problem is that we're using terms that we haven't contributed to the definition of, and that is, I think, problematic. And to be honest, I find this on a worrying scale, and I'll tell you how. Over the past, particularly since 9/11, 12 years, but not exclusively just it's been happening over the past 20, 30, 40 years. We have often found that certain terms are taken by, the West, Western intellectual circles, political circles, and then remanufactured and then delivered back to us. And I give you one example of a term that is now used in extremely negative terms, that has very bad negative connotations, which now we have, unfortunately, it's been manufactured on our behalf, which now we use readily, and that is jihadist. Jihadist. Jihad, as Muslims will understand, is one of the most noble core principles of any Muslim. Simply, you cannot be a Muslim without jihad. Because the very first step of jihad, and in fact, as described by the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the biggest and the most prominent and predominant form of jihad is that jihad that you fight on a daily basis with your own self. Trying to fight off those whims and those desires and those lusts and those selfish whims and pulls and attractions, to the element of fighting off aggressors and the such. I mean, there is a huge spectrum. However, that word was taken, repackaged, and sent back to us, and now we're using it, oh, he's a jihadist, as though it's a bad thing. Many of my friends, when I grew up, were called jihad. Now, virtually no one calls their children jihad anymore, because now it's a dangerous word. And this, we must be extremely careful about these terms and about how we reuse them, how we proliferate them, how we disseminate them. So I just wanted to mention that a little bit. And I agree also entirely with the foundation of what Ustad Al-Kifl mentioned in terms of that sort of fantastical, that utopian notion of an Islamic state that is often referred to. And I think that those who talk about the concept of the Islamic state, they conflate several concepts. The concept of the Ummah, and reducing that to a notion which is packageable, which is something that we all recognize today in a world of nation states, meaning that we want another nation state, as I said yesterday, with a national anthem and a national flag and a football team that takes part possibly in the World Cup qualifiers, called an Islamic state, run by someone who maybe wears a turban rather than a shirt and tie. So it's that kind of utopia, and governed by Sharia in whatever forms that we individually or respectively take. Because if we were to have a few minutes to go around the table and everyone gives what they understand from a Sharia and how it looks, giving everyone 2 minutes, I'm pretty sure that we'll come to, if there's 30 of us, about 40 models of what Sharia is. So I think that there's a conflation between that, and there's a conflation between the issue of the Islamic State and the Tahkim Shar'illah. As though when I, for instance, within my family group, within my social group, within my community circle, within my organizational structure in the UK, cannot نحكم شرع الله. I'm pretty sure that I أحكم شرع الله. I advocate the way of Allah, the ordination of Allah in my own life, within our circle, within our social dealings. So tahkim shar' Allah, to be reduced to the level of on a geographical ground, within a particular political boundary and political is I believe is problematic in terms of the theoretical proposition that is made. Now let's come to the elephant in the table, which was exposed entirely by Ustad al-Kifl. And just to try to explain, because one of the things that I have done now for more than 20 years is deal with the media. And I have to say that it's one of the most problematic areas, and an area that, although we've written several publications and I've, year in, year out, I train people on how to deal with the media, but it's one of the most complicated and difficult areas to navigate. Simply because there are limitations that you have to admit to. There is obviously some foul play on parts of many sectors of the media today, but realistically, there are many constraints. For instance, the article that was referred to by Ustad al-Kifl, which was sent to me, the link was sent to me by Dr. Ahmed Farouk yesterday. It basically reduced the discussion of 6 hours, a whole day, into 500 words. Yes? And I think out of them I was quoted in something like 220 words. So imagine, that whole discussion, that elaboration. I was sweating yesterday, I was using examples, and it had to be taken out. And of course you can't expect a newspaper to publish everything, and to say, well, he said this within the context of this. So the very first thing I would say is that I would never ever, and I travel quite a lot, I would never ever go to any country which I'm visiting and profess to tell people how to conduct their affairs. It's insane. It's ill-mannered and un-Islamic, I would suggest, illogical, and simply because most of what we're dealing with is extremely contextual. Very, very contextual. As Ustad said, the absolutes, the fixtures, the fundamentals, the unshakables, the unmovables are extremely limited. We can list them on a sheet of A4 paper. We can all memorize them by heart. The others are governed by al-maslaha, and what is al-maslaha in Malaysia is not al-maslaha somewhere else. Al-urf, culture, what people's tastes, preferences, certain all these things that come into play. So the last thing I would profess to do is to come to Malaysia and say, well, this is right and this is wrong. And therefore the statement that I made regarding hudud being used for political purposes was, and I think that in my presentation several times, I spoke of specific examples. I said Saudi Arabia, I said Iran, I said Afghanistan, I said Pakistan, Sudan, whom, by the way, I'm extremely close to, from the president downwards. I'm extremely close to them. I'm one of their advisors. I'm speaking to them now regarding this case of the lady, Maryam, the Christian lady who's been sentenced to death. So, but still, I gave those examples, and I said these countries have, in everyone's assessment, far more challenging issues that they needed to address, rather than to come and jump directly to impose the issue of hudud. Again, I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm saying that this is something which is problematic. Because when we're talking today about a system in which we wish for the values in which we believe, and yesterday I separated between, and I answered the question about Hizb ut-Tahrir when you asked Ahmed about Hizb ut-Tahrir and the concept of the Islamic State. And I said, why do we need to reduce the whole concept, this beautiful concept, to a geographical location, a political entity, when what the concept of ummah actually induces are the values and principles of Islam that can be practiced worldwide. And therefore, The whole world is that ummah. Why am I reducing it? Why do I want to, you know, build an enclave? A ghetto, if you wish, a political ghetto. Why do I want to do that? When I have Muslims living in provinces in China which, you know, there aren't any airports to get to, where there are places in Africa where there are Muslims. And why do I need to compartmentalize this whole thing? So what we're talking about is, how is it possible? How is it possible to proliferate and disseminate and to share these values? Because these are values which I believe are in the best interest of human beings, not of Muslims, of human beings. Justice, freedom, equality, parity in economic terms and social and political terms, openness, transparency, accountability, responsibility. You know, all these concepts that we believe in. If you speak to anyone of a different faith or of no faith whatsoever, wherever they may be, they won't say that this is a bad idea. Most people will understand that these are good things. So how is it possible to have those values and those principles disseminated worldwide? How can I see to it that, for instance, my country, Britain, the United Kingdom, becomes, in the very loose terms, and I know I'm on record here, and if this went on YouTube I'll be in much problem, how it can become an Islamic, you know, dominion, how it can become through the values that are practiced. Because yesterday I quoted the incident of the first hijrah, the first migration to Al-Habasha, today's Ethiopia, which was ruled by a priest, by a Christian priest. And when the Prophet ﷺ, when he gave his justification for sending his dearest and closest to that foreign land, and it wasn't an easy thing, it was a very difficult, arduous trip to cross the seas for Arabs. It was quite problematic. To them, the seas were full of you know, creatures that they can't stand, they couldn't you know, fathom and the such, and go to these foreign lands. And he said very simply, but it was a governing premise, إِنَّ فِيهَا مَلِكًا لَا يُظْلَمُ عِنْدَهُ أَحَدٍ. It is ruled by a king or a ruler in whose presence no one is dealt with injustice. That's the premise. And to him, therefore, Al-Habasha, Ethiopia, ruled by the Christian priest, became far better than Mecca, where the house of Allah is. You see, that's the kind of notion that we have to deal with. We're talking about values, we're talking about principles, we're talking about overriding concepts that are for the betterment of everyone. When I make da'wah, it's not to convert, it's to proliferate and to spread the values. Because I want everyone, regardless of their faith, regardless of their culture, regardless of to live in a state of justice. It doesn't please me that there are Christians who are dealt with injustice. It doesn't please me that there are pagans being treated unjustly by whatever conditions they are. It doesn't please me that there are you know, people of a various culture in wherever they are living under inhumane social or economic situations. It doesn't please me. The salvation of humanity isn't to convert them all to Islam. That was even beyond the mandate of the Prophet Muhammad. But to spread the values and the principles of Islam, which are essentially principles and values that everyone subscribes to, is what our objective is. And therefore, the question that I must ask is, when let me start off with a sort of an example that I often share with my colleagues and peers in the UK and Europe. It's a concern of mine, and I say that if we are talking about shared universal values, and if I am keen on everyone adopting those values, why do I need to coin them Islamic? Do you get what I mean? Mm-hmm. If I'm running a bank, and it's a bank that is based on what I believe as Islamic principles of finance, would it be better to call that an Islamic bank? Or would it be maybe a little bit better to call it an ethical bank? You see? If I have a shop that does fair trading, that gets from small farmers and from independent vendors of various stuff in order to create an economy that is beyond the reach of the big corporations, the multinationals. If I was to call it an Islamic food store or shop, would it or would it not alienate those who aren't Muslims? Of course, people who aren't Muslims would immediately feel that this is not for them. The food being sold, the benefits being reaped and the such, it's not for them. But if I was to coin it something else, the benefits would spread far better. In fact, I am on an advisory group on Islamic schools, and every single meeting they always say, "Oh, Dr. Anas, please don't say it again, don't repeat." I say, "Yahi, why are we called Islamic schools? Why aren't we just called schools? Why? If we profess to be teaching the best, don't I want everyone's child to be part of this best? Why do I want to, monopolize what I have? Why do I want to do that?" So, and this is on a very basic premise, and that is coining stuff. I, for instance, have a problem with the coinage of political Islam, with the coinage itself. Although I use it, I write it, I use those simply because it's what's out there. But I have a problem with it. I have a problem with it. I have to say I have a problem with it, in terms of the label itself and in terms of the connotations that it carries and the impressions that it brings with it, the package, the baggage. So, coming back to the issue of hudud, I'm pretty sure, and without having had a lengthy discussion with Ustad al-Kifl or with my beloved brothers and ulama of PAS, I'm pretty sure that what they want is the betterment of Malaysia as a whole. Because we believe that the teachings of Allah are for the benefit of everyone. Those who are obedient to Allah and those who are disobedient to Allah. Those who believe in Islam and those who don't believe in Islam. We believe that. As Muslims, we believe that. Yes? وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have sent you not but as a mercy to all mankind. And to some mufassirin, they said even beyond human beings. The environment, beasts in the wild and the such. So that is my objective. Why do I need to coin my politics, which is to the benefit of everyone, Islamic? Why do I need to coin my party, which I think works for the betterment of everyone, an Islamic party? Why do I need to call the laws and legislation that I want to govern my country, which are for the betterment of everyone, Sharia? Why? I know it's Sharia. I'm running by Sharia. I understand it to be Sharia. But I want people to understand that it's for the betterment. It's not exclusive to Muslims. I don't want just Muslims to live and in safety and security and the others could go to hell. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. So my problem starts from the element of coinage. Terming things is problematic, and I think that we need, and by the way, the reason why we do this, the reason why we resort to terms such as the Islamic State, we resort to the concept of Sharia, of jihad, of these concepts that are in today's world, and I'll come to describe today's world a little bit, problematic. The reason why is because usually, such as yesterday I gave the example of how now we in Britain are calling for the assertion of Britishness. Now we want to be British. Why? Because that happens when you feel vulnerable and weak and attacked and marginalized. So you want to resort to something which makes you feel safe again. You want to go inside your house and shut the doors and not let anyone else in. We want to be British, we want to be European. All of a sudden we get this. When you're confident, when you're achieving economic success, political prosperity, development, You want to open up. All of a sudden, you're proud of being, a world leader, a world economic, player or the such, because you have no such vulnerabilities, no such insecurities. And at this moment of time, Muslims generally, worldwide, and particularly those who live in minorities. By the way, I hope that you have in mind that I come from a Muslim minority perspective. I mean, you are living in a Muslim majority country. But according to some statistics, most Muslims around the world, the 1.7 billion, live as minorities. In India, China, and Europe, and North America, and Latin America, and Africa, as minorities. So bear in mind that the perspectives are different. You're talking about a country which is Muslim, which is a Muslim country. I'm talking about maybe minority communities that need to survive and they have their own struggles. So on a level of why we resort to these terms is understandable. But we need, and as intellectuals, as leaders, I think we need to propose a way beyond this. Because we have a world project, because we have this grand project for the development of the world, for the construction of what is best for all human beings. We have this grand project, and hence we can't be nationalistic, even on a religious term, about what we have to spread and what we have to say. Now, add to the issue of coinage, the issue which I feel is extremely important, and I'm pretty sure that Ustad al-Kifl in his statement also asserted this, and that is the kind of, what are we looking at? When we talk about what we're trying to create, sometimes when I have a discussion, I tell people, listen, describe it to me. You're talking about concepts. Make it tangible. Tell me how it looks. Is it square? Is it round? Is it yellow, red, black, blue? What is it? Make me, even when I have these discussions with my brothers from Hizb ut-Tahrir, I say to them, tell me how it works, this Islamic State thing. Tell me how it works. How are you going to get there? What are the steps? Okay, fine, the time frame is down to Allah. No problem at all. Okay, we can leave that undecided. But tell me how it looks. What does it look like? How do we get to the president, for instance? Or will it be a king? Will it be a sultan? Will it be will he have a term forever? A lifelong, when he dies, and then his sons. How is it going to happen? Tell me. How are we going to arrive at Ahlul Halli wal Aqd? This fiqh concept that came much later, but now has become part of our narrative when we talk about the Islamic State. Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Okay, how do we get to them? To me, it's the House of Lords and House of Parliament. That's to me. To them, no, it's Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Okay, so how do we get to them? How do I choose that this person is to be from Ahlul Halli wal Aqd? Oh, Shura. So we're talking about, again, majority vote. Okay, so we're talking about elections here. So sometimes I think we need to describe, make it more imaginable what it is that we're talking about. And essentially what we're talking about in terms of the kind of existence that we want is made of several sections. The main section, which covers everyone and everything, are the guiding values and principles. Every nation, every community, every society, yarhamkumullah, needs to be guided by its set of principles and values. If you wish, in today's modern contemporary admin terms, they're called a vision. What's your vision? What is it that you want to arrive at? So what is that dream, that aspiration? Okay, what are my guiding values? Justice, a just society. I want a free society, a dignified, prosperous society. That's the... But then to work that, I need a set of laws and legislation. The compartments that work this, I see government, I see a constitution, I see a civil society, I see a judiciary, I see a security, because all this, these are the cogs within the machine. Now, I'll tell you what. How about I call them these? Instead of values, I'm going to say the commandments of Allah. Instead of laws and legislation, I'm going to call it Sharia. Instead of government, I'm going to call it Al-Imara. Instead of It's the same thing. But all of a sudden, I've made it an alien project. And when we come to talk about this in the context which you have, and which I have a minute understanding of, which doesn't allow me to profess or to project, but I have a minute understanding of, a context where there is a debate. I won't say a problem, I won't say a crisis, I won't say a conflict, I will say there is a debate happening. You have significant minorities, whether they be ethnic, racial, religious, cultural. You have an array. Of what benefit would it be to use terms that are problematic at this moment of time when there is a debate going on? So at a time when people are feeling vulnerable and scared of you, you come to propose ideas that are labeled, packaged. The content, I'm pretty sure if you repackaged it, no one would disagree with. But they need to be presented better, because at this moment of time, they're problematic in themselves. So all of a sudden, the project is at a stop-start stage simply because I've packaged it wrong. I presented it wrong. I branded it wrong. I have put the wrong kind of faces behind it. You know, with all due respect, but you know, it's like we have an issue with media spokespeople in the UK, and I'm pretty sure Ustad Al-Kifl knows about this well. You know, we have issues flared up by the media every now and then. One of them is the issue of hijab and niqab and so on. And then we have a line of Muslim spokesmen lining up, you know, the BBC and Sky and Channel 4 studios. All of them, mashallah, brothers with turbans and long beards and the such. And you ask yourself, why isn't there one single sister? Why isn't there one single sister who either wears hijab or doesn't, who wears niqab or doesn't, or the such, that comes and defends herself? Why is it that the brothers are doing the defending? Oh, no, it's a woman's free choice. Well, let a woman come and speak and say it's a free choice. You know, it's a matter of presentation. He's not wrong. He's not a bad guy. He's an authority, but he's the wrong face. So these are technical issues, but they're very, very profound. They're very, very profound. The other thing so this is about the geographical location and the context of what's happening, the internal politics, and what kind of language, what kind of face, what kind of image, what kind of tone I need to use at this moment of time. If I was to make my claim for Islamophobia, for instance, we're holding an international conference on fighting Islamophobia in Britain, and I invited some of my dear brothers and sisters, people I have trust in, to present their papers. One of them arrived a few days ago, and I was horrified. It was full of Quranic references, and the Prophet ﷺ did this, and the Sirah Nabawiyya did this, and I wrote back to him. I said, Ya akhi, do you know that you're speaking to an international non-Muslim audience? Yani, you need to use a different kind of language. By all means, quote from the Quran, but quote it in a way that people, they understand that you're talking to them. You're not talking above them. You're not talking beyond them. You are addressing them. You are relevant to them. You are not an alien to them. The other thing is, and with this I will finish, is the matter of timing. As someone said, and this is a cliche in a state, timing is everything. Doing something now has its own message and has its own implication. Delaying it for a few weeks, delaying it for a few years, will bring it with it a different set of implications. And this is where we need astute minds. And this is where al-hikmah comes in. It's not just about doing right. We have no doubt in our brothers that they're right, in terms of right and wrong and the such, but are they doing right, guided with al-hikmah in terms, and when in the Quranic verse, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati al hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan." Call to the way of your Lord with wisdom and with beautiful preaching. And if you argue with them in ways that are best. Don't curse, don't raise your voice, don't be offensive, don't be abusive and the such. Now this is an overriding guiding manual. It's a manual as to how to approach and engage with people in terms of a debate or a discussion. The commentators and Mufassirun, when they came to the term al-hikmah, many of them said that al-hikmah, the wisdom here, is about choosing the right place and the right time. So for instance, they gave the example, many fuqaha, they gave the example, they said, if you're going to attend a wedding ceremony and you're asked to say a few words, don't go quoting the verses of death and hellfire and divorce and the rights of a divorcee and how you should be kind to the divorcee, the divorced wife. When you're quoting the Quran, no one can say that you're wrong. No one can say that you're saying the wrong words. You're quoting the words of Allah, but it's in the wrong context. When you speak to someone, for instance, who's a child of 10 or 11 years old, and you speak to them in a high register, and they get nothing. That's losing. That's where wisdom comes in. So, I believe that the issue of time is extremely relevant. It's extremely relevant. And the question is, why now? And this is, I think, one of the quotations that was made in the article today. And that is that, why are we within this context, when there is an issue, when there is a problem, when there is a debate going on? I'm proposing this and pushing for it. And often, and I'm sure that our brothers know this, the problem is often about, let's come down to it. And my own understanding, and this we have, we've had several discussions and debates, even with many of the ulama, and many of them will also have, Ustad al-Kifl would have met with them and discussed with them, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Sheikh Abdullah Judea, Abdullah bin Bayya, and others, grand scholars. And, when we talk about the issue of al-hudud, what is clear is that, and you're absolutely right in terms of qat'iyyu dalalati, qat'iyyu thubut. The Quran is entirely qat'iyyu thubut. There is no question. Qat'iyyu dalal in terms of its indication and meaning, also there is no question. But all this comes within two things: a time and a place. The time is within the da'wah of Islam, which took 23 years. These verses were reportedly revealed in the last 18 months. Some say last 6 months, some say last 2 years, but generally speaking, on average, the last 18 months of those 23 years. Meaning that for 21 and a half years of da'wah, 7.5 years after the establishment of the state of Al-Madinah, if we wish, al-hudud weren't revealed. That is a guideline. That is, it's one of the ways in which we are guided by the issue of al-hudud. That the penal code comes at the end of establishing a structure, establishing a system, establishing a reality. And the reality is, the place is where the conditions are conducive to then all of society embracing hudud, without them being called hudud. When I am in a society where I am safe, my job and my income and my economic welfare are secure, when my family, my children, their education, their opportunities in life are secure, when I know that I have exactly, precisely equal rights to my next door neighbor and to everyone else in my country, when I know that I have precisely the exact amount and level of responsibility as everyone else, when my country, my nation, my community, my people are thriving, prospering, when we live a life of peace, inner peace as well as outer peace, when I'm safe in what I say, how I think, how I express myself, I ask questions freely and they are answered with respect, I will then accept any safeguards to ensure that that existence remains and persists, regardless of what that penal code is. That those who transgress, despite their economic welfare being secure, they want more. Those who have rights and privileges, all secured, yet they transgress and take what is not theirs. putting everyone at risk. Those who claim more rights than they are due, who fall short consistently, deliberately on their responsibilities, despite those responsibilities being equally shared. In order to safeguard my existence, my future, my society, I would accept any kind of safeguards. Call them what you may. Call them hudud, call them penal code, call them whatever you call them. Because ultimately, technically speaking, executing someone is executing someone, whether it's in Texas, Ohio, or whether it's in Malaysia. You can call it hudud if you want, or you can call it just putting someone to death. Ultimately, it's a civil code. You see, there's this global debate about, the hudud. Oh, no, you must condemn. Well, hang on, condemn what's happening in America first, and then you can condemn what's happening in elsewhere. On a technical point of view, it's the same. Okay, so stoning people is extremely harsh. Oh, really? Did you hear about what's happened to that inmate in Ohio the other day? How he writhed with pain for 40 minutes whilst being injected and his veins burst, and he was in pain for 40 minutes until even the victims' families couldn't watch anymore. So let's not be too pedantic about this, and let's not be too precious about this. The issue is the time right? Have I allowed for the social conditions? And one thing that and with this I will end. When the verses of السارق والسارقة فاقطعوا أيديهما, the thieves, you cut their hands off, man or woman, absolutely clear. The Prophet ﷺ came out and made a statement, and he said, لو أن فاطمة بنت محمد سرقت لقطعت يدها. If Fatima, my own daughter, my most precious daughter, was to steal, I would cut off her hands. What the Prophet ﷺ was stating, the message he was sending, that there is no one who is above the law. No one, not even the head of state, the messenger of Allah, the divine messenger, is beyond these laws. Everyone. Immediately, everyone's mind is put at ease. This will never be used for political gains. This will never be used to settle personal quarrels. This will not mean that a certain family has more rights and privileges and therefore they can transgress. It means that we are all equal. And for that reason, I personally think that when I criticize the likes of Saudi Arabia or Sudan or Iran or Pakistan for implementing hudud, I personally, as I said yesterday, I think at the end I said, don't get the idea that I'm disputing hudud. Don't get the idea that I dispute that hudud are for the betterment of humanity. Not at all, not an iota. But whether the conditions are right for their implementation, I don't think so. That kind of condition, I think we are extremely far off from. So those are some of the ideas. I hope that I've made my arguments clear. And I apologize for taking too long, and if I've transgressed or crossed any lines. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah.